so I think we are going to officially start the session. So again, welcome everybody to the Comprehensive School Safety, Awareness and Advocacy Action webinar hosted by INI and GADRRRES. My name is Ariel Rivera Solari. I'm the INI Standards and Practice Team Lead, and I'm greetings everybody from Bogota, Colombia. The agenda that we have for today is an introduction to International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction from Janet Elthworth, the Chief Communication Advocacy, Knowledge Management and ICT from UNDRR. In the first part, we will have what is GADRRRES and the Comprehensive School Safety Framework by Maya Lidnenen, Education Officer from UNICEF and also co-chair of the GADRRRES Advocacy Working Group. The second part of this webinar will be good practices and case studies from Ilaria Paolozzi, Senior Advocacy and Policy Advisor from the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attacks, and Felicity Pierce, also research consultant from the same organization. And also we will have Yasir Arafat, Education Officer from Pakistan, also presenting a case study. And also in the part 2, we will have Alan Malensi, Project Manager from Climate Smart Education System Strategy Capabilities Initiative from Save the Children Malawi. In the third part, we will have advocacy opportunities in charge of Socrates Blachakis, who is Program Specialist Disaster Risk Reduction from UNICEF and also co-chair of the GADRRRES Advocacy Working Group, to close with questions and answers. Say that, Andrew, if we can go to the first slide. Next slide. The first slide that we're showing is the INI strategic framework that will be launched next Monday, the 2024-2030, and it's showing the new strategic priorities or the updated strategic priorities, and you can see that climate change is one of the main cross-cutting intervention from INI. Also, I can say from INI side that the Comprehensive School Safety Framework has been duly incorporated in the update of the Minimum Standards 2024 edition. So that is the way that INI is taking forward climate change and the Comprehensive School Safety Framework. Say that, I will give the floor to Janet to start with the first part of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all, everyone out there who's taken the time to join us from all over the world. Your attention and time is very valid, very valuable to us. I'm here to talk a little bit about International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. It's a UN day, and we celebrate it each year on the 13th of October. And we choose a different theme, but we always link the theme to the Sendai framework and also to the SDGs. And this year we are very excited because the theme is on empowering future generations. And we have tried to look at the way conversations are going in the world. We're linking the theme to the importance of youth and also to the Summit of the Future that's coming up in September. But it's also a chance to recognize the importance that youth play in sustainable development and in disaster risk reduction. For us, it's another opportunity as well to link the high-level policy that the UN works on with the concrete and community engagement that is going on all around the world, and to partner with different partners who are working in this field. We've been overwhelmed by the support of all the partners, and we're really proud to be working with GADRRRES and the other partners on this topic. So we have shared the link to the website in the chat. We've got a lot of different tools that will help to celebrate the day. Just very briefly, we've got 2 pillars under this theme. So the first one is about resilient schools, and this really recognizes that schools are critical infrastructure and that they are often in the community also the evacuation center, the safe space, the place where the community come together. It recognizes that children have a right to safe education, and for that education not to be disrupted by disasters when they occur, and also that education is at the heart of community resilience. And so children are often disproportionately impacted, and getting their education back underway quickly after a hazard hits is one of the most important things that we can do for a resilient future. The second pillar is also around recognizing that youth and children are advocates of change and advocates of DRR, and that they're often the ones who know about these things. They learn about DRR in school, and they take that learning back to their communities and back to their families, and they have very rich information and experiences to share as well, so they can also inform the DRR processes and should inform those processes. So it's a very rich topic that we've got, and as I mentioned, it's really exciting to work with all the partners. In concrete terms, we're also, as UNDRR, calling for all governments to sign up to the comprehensive Safer Schools framework, and you will hear more about that later in the session, so I won't go into the details of what that entails, but this is how we are connecting that work to our engagement, and of course it's not something that we can achieve in one day, so we will be running that through our regional platforms for disaster risk reduction that take place this year, and our global platform that will take place in June next year. And we will be really pushing to make sure that all countries have not only signed that, but also are implementing that. As our new Secretary General Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction, Mr. Kamal Kishore, recently said to me, there's just no excuse why every single country doesn't want to sign up and ensure that children have access to safe education and safe schools. So that's the theme and the topic in a nutshell. Finally, I just want to point out that we don't judge the success of our day on the activities that UNDRR carries out. We can't do this alone. We rely on the partnerships, and we rely on the reach of all of you, all of our partners. We've got a lot of topics, a lot of tools and resources that we've generated for the day. So I would urge you all to go and have a look at the website. We've got social media assets, we've got a game, we've got even a scout badge, and lots of things, resources for teachers and students that they can do in their communities and in their schools. So do get involved. We're grateful for your collaboration, and we look forward to a very successful International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, working with all of you. Thanks, Ariel. Back to you.
Thank you very much. So now we are going to share the presentation. So Maya Litnanin, Education Officer from UNICEF, can walk us through what is GADRRRES and the CSSF.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ariel. So Maya Litnanin here from UNICEF, representing GADRRRES as one of the co-chairs of the Advocacy Working Group. And I'm going to provide a very quick overview around why school safety is such an important topic at the moment, and say a few words about GADRRRES and the CSS framework, which I hope many of you are already implementing and working on. So globally, we're seeing an alarming increase in disasters and emergencies, whether these are stemming from climate change or conflict or other threats. And we're seeing that these are directly impacting the learning and education of children, making it harder for children to stay safe and continue their education, and ultimately putting the future of millions of children at risk. As you can see here in this slide, the scale of the problem is quite staggering. We have 1 billion children that are living in countries at extreme high risk to the impacts of climate change alone, which has serious consequences for their education. And this makes it clear that ensuring school safety and the right to education is more crucial than ever. Next slide, please. So what is GADRRRES? GADRRRES is the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience in the Education Sector. And it's a coalition of 21 organizations consisting of UN agencies, international NGOs, youth groups, and private sector organizations that have come together to ensure that all children can have a safe learning environment. And GADRRRES was established in 2013 to promote a comprehensive approach to school safety. Beyond the global work that we do at GADRRRES, there are also 3 regional affiliations that operate in Latin America and the Caribbean, in West and Central Africa, and in the Asia Pacific region. And we're grateful for these groups for their regional leadership in taking this work forward. Then about the comprehensive school safety framework. So this is the framework that is guides the work of the Alliance. It's currently endorsed by over 70 countries, and we will hear a little bit more about the advocacy work later in the session. But a few words about the goals of the framework. There are 3 goals that are there in the slides. So the CSSF aims to strengthen the resilience of the education system, to ensure education continuity, and to equip children with the skills, knowledge, and behaviors that they need to prepare and respond to various shocks and stresses. Next slide, please. And then the important thing about GADRRRES and the CSF is that we really focus on an all hazards, all risks approach, looking at addressing hazards and risks under 4 broad categories. So natural and climate-induced, technological, biological, and health-related, and those arising from conflict, violence, and everyday dangers. And the idea is that the framework provides governments with a practical tool that helps them advance topics like disaster risk reduction, climate action, and the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. And finally, there are 4 components to the CSSF. The foundation and 3 intersecting pillars, and each component has a specific set of actors and recommended strategies to achieve these goals. So we have the foundation, which refers to the enabling systems and policies that strengthen system level resilience, and that's really laying the foundation for the work. And then there are 3 pillars: safe school facilities, safe schools, and learning continuity management, and then risk reduction and resilience education. And all of these are supplemented by various materials that we have on the GADRRRES website. I think that's it from my side. Over to you, Ariel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are entering now on the second part, good practices and case studies. We will start with Ilaria Paolozzi and Felicity Pierce from Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attacks.
Thank you very much, Ariel, for giving us the floor. This is Ilaria speaking, and on behalf of the GCPEA coalition, thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to start and then pass the floor to my colleague Felicity in a second. But before that, I wanted to just say 2 words about the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, for those of you who may not be familiar with it. It is a coalition of UN agencies and international civil society organizations that was established in 2010 with the purpose of advancing and advocating at global level for the protection of education in conflict. Since then, the coalition has been really mainly working on 2 levels. One is research, and we've been really monitoring on a systematic basis and documenting attacks on education globally, in particular in countries where there's a conflict. And on the other hand, we've been doing advocacy with member states to mobilize political support to prevent and effectively respond to attacks on education. If we can move to the first slide, I will just introduce an important piece of work that we have published this year, and we also had the pleasure to publicly launch together with the INE earlier in June. Here today, we wanted to go a little bit more into the details of this report and look at the initial linkages between climate insecurity and attacks on education that we have established. But before doing that, just wanted to highlight, for those of you who haven't had in particular the opportunity to see the report, this is the most comprehensive report on attacks on education globally that really looks at the issue with such a broad scope and lens. The report tracks 6 forms of violations against education: attacks on schools, attacks on students and education personnel, military use of schools and university, child recruitment at or on the way to or from school, sexual violence perpetrated by armed forces, other security personnel or armed groups on the way to or from school or universities, and attacks on higher education. The 2024 edition is the 7th edition in a series of publications that have been monitoring, what we call attacks on education as GCPEA, meaning the threats or actual use of force against students, teachers, professors, education personnel, or education facilities and materials, as well the military use of schools and universities. In this report, we have 70 reported cases of attacks and military use in 79 countries for the period 2022 and 2023, out of which 28 of these 79 countries are included with a specific focus and in-depth analysis because of the situation, because they have experienced more than 10 reported attacks on education over a 2-year period, as well as armed conflict during that reporting period. And this edition is the first one that includes this new element, this new focus for GCPEA on climate insecurity, on linkages between climate change, climate insecurity, and attacks in education. It has been a response to a gap that we have started to see, and our members and partners have started to see as well, and encouraging us to integrate this perspective and focus into the work. And so it's a first step. GCPEA is planning to do more on the issue. It's definitely, not the end of the work, but the findings that now Felicity is going to present suggest that there's much more research and analysis that needs to be done. And I'll pass on to Felicity and come back later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilaria and Ariel. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and share some of the information from Education Under Attack. Just as an introduction on the big picture, in terms of data, we found an average of 8 attacks or cases of military use of schools and universities per day during the 2022 to 2023 reporting period. And as everyone can imagine or knows, the impact of attacks on education in this way is always grave. Sometimes attacks kill and injure students or educators. Sometimes schools and universities are damaged. And in the longer term, we see students might not resume studies for sometimes weeks or years, or perhaps never returning to school. And we also know that female students and students with disabilities are particularly impacted. So moving on into more of the findings, if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we know that in the two previous years, 2022 and 2023, conflicts have increased, including in scale. And we know that some conflicts have been exacerbated by some of the effects of climate change. As Ilaria said already, we identified attacks in 79 countries, and there are 28 countries profiled in the report. In total, we identified around 6,000 reported attacks on education or military use of schools and universities, which was an increase of almost 20% compared to the 2 years previous, so 2020 and 2021. We also found that more than 10,000 students and educators were reportedly killed, injured, abducted, arrested, or otherwise harmed by attacks on education, which also represented a huge increase of over 10% compared to the previous period. Next slide, please. So just to give a sort of global picture of what we've found with our research, you can see some of the most affected countries, I should say. For example, are Palestine, Ukraine, Democratic Republic of the Congo, also Myanmar, and Afghanistan. Next slide, please. Thank you. Attacks on schools are the most prevalent form of attack that we found, and they represent more than half of all reported attacks that we identified. And they were identified in 27 of the 28 countries that we profile. As you can see in the slide, some countries were very heavily affected by this attack type. Attacks on schools include airstrikes, shelling, arson, looting, as well as threats. And we know that they cause, the death and injury of students and staff, and damage to hundreds of school facilities, and significant lost learning over that period and into the future. Just to note, also, incidents of the military use of schools and universities increased in the reporting period mentioned. And there were over 1,000 incidents of this violation, or this attack type, let's say. Next slide, please. So as we started to look at linkages between climate change and conflict, and how this interacts with attacks on education, we start to see some connections, and these are some of the sort of specific examples to give a picture of what we might be looking at. In the Sahel, for example, we found a number of incidents where, within a context where there is conflict and also food insecurity, some of which is climate related, we see an increase in the number of lootings of school canteens specifically. Also in the Philippines, we saw that some schools that were, I think this was touched on before, schools that were used as temporary shelters during or after typhoons or other events were then targeted for attack while they were being used by civilians. And lastly, we saw in contexts such as Somalia, Kenya, and Nigeria, again, this is sort of a possible connection that we've seen between intercommunal violence, which sometimes involves attacks on students when they're on the way to or from school, which seems to have been exacerbated during the last reporting period by drought and resource scarcity. So those are our initial linkages, and as Ilaria said, we're working on more research in this sort of connection. And actually, I'll pass back to Ilaria now to go through some of our recommendations.
Thank you, Felicity. Yes, the report also includes a long list, a rich list of recommendations, and here is the summary of the key recommendations that we have included in relation to climate change attacks, but also the linkages with the comprehensive safety school framework. GCPEA is an active member of GADRRRES, and we've been working for a long time around building a body of knowledge, joint knowledge about the two frameworks, and then proactively promoting them to foster synergetic implementation of the two frameworks. As you may have seen, the comprehensive school framework specifically refers to the Safe School Declaration at different instances in general terms as one of the frameworks to use, broadly speaking, but also specifically in relation to implementation of school practices for peace building and social cohesion. So from GCPEA side, we constantly and regularly call for implementation of the Safe School Declaration in conjunction with the Comprehensive Safety School Framework as a way to help as well, to better contextualize the attacks, understand the root causes, and therefore, adapt implementation measures to really tackle the root causes more effectively. The whole hazards, all risks approach for prevention and response to attacks. It's really helpful for promoting this understanding that climate change needs to be taken into account in relation to the implementation of the Safe School Declaration. And it also helps to see the linkages, between violence, climate change, and attacks. Another recommendation is that states should work with education providers and relevant partners to develop comprehensive school safety and security plans to account for risks posed by climate insecurity and education in the local context. So try to really mitigate the risks in advance. And then the last recommendation is about states monitoring bodies to strengthen early warning systems and anticipatory action to include indicators of climate insecurity alongside the capacity to communicate relevant risks and threats to schools. So collect reliable data on these linkages and continue to strengthen the knowledge. Last slide, please. Very briefly, I would just want to take the opportunity to flag that as we are here together talking about the two frameworks, we have also the two unique opportunities, advocacy opportunities that we can collectively seize to advance our joint efforts. The first one being next week, 9th of September, the International Day to Protect Education from Attack. It will be the fifth International Day since the establishment of this UN International Day by the GA 5 years ago under the leadership of Qatar. We then have the IDDRR, as we already heard about from earlier, from colleagues, and then I wanted to highlight that next year will be the 10th anniversary of the Safe Schools Declaration. So we have a window of opportunity to really try to create a momentum, I think, around this and then mobilize actors accordingly. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for the attention. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Now we pass to Yasir Arafat, Education Officer from Pakistan, to the next study case.
Thank you very much. Regarding Pakistan, I would like to say that school safety has been a critical element because Pakistan is prone to the natural and man-made disasters since decades. Just for the sake of background, the momentum that was gained during that time was from the earthquake 2005, where we lost around like 78,000 children and teachers, and we lost hundreds of schools in earthquake affected areas. The government has been keen in Pakistan, different authorities has been established, and then we had a National Disaster Management Authority. And I am happy to share that the recommendation shared previously have been incorporated into the case of Pakistan, where Pakistan established a school safety framework with the support from UNICEF and other stakeholders. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the commitment to the national and international frameworks has been incorporated into the document, including National Education Policy 2009 and this National Disaster Management Act 2010, Sendai Framework, DGs and SARC 2015. The purpose was to basically tap into the international expertise, knowledge, to localize this particular knowledge into the documentation where the school safety framework is developed with the help of a range of stakeholders by the National Disaster Management Authority and in collaboration with UNICEF and partners. Next, please. So this Pakistan School Safety Framework has been an comprehensive initiative where we incorporated different elements that we can summarize here, like the institutionalization of school safety committee that has been like existing into the government system, and that was basically a group that has been active to engage around the school safety elements. The schools, those have been identified for the risks of natural and man-made disasters, has been assessed in consultation with the communities, with relevant education and other departments, and then the formation and development of the school safety plan. And that has been basically an exercise that incorporated the input from the community, the active participation of school councils around these schools. Then we have been talking about with the government, with other partners to scale up this, because Pakistan is a larger country where we are having hundreds and thousands of schools. So the scale up of this particular initiative has been important. The mainstreaming and integration of disaster risk reduction and school safety into the training of teacher has been taken up with the training institution from the government across all 4 provinces and federal areas, where the training material was basically screened to be incorporated by these elements of school safety and DRR. Similarly, the curriculum has been reviewed. The co-curricular activities has been integrated into the school, including the mock drills, including the first aid drills, and that has been very much effective in terms of preparing children, preparing communities and teachers for any anticipatory hazard and disaster within these villages and within these schools. Next slide, please. School safety framework at the national level was established, and then the inter-education sectoral plan at national level and as well as at the school level. And the implementation of these school safety plans has been monitored at different levels by the district authorities, by school councils, and other stakeholders. And these activities has been coordinated by different forums, particularly the DRR forums at the district level, where we are having district officials, civil society organizations, and other academia people. Those have been actively involved in the coordination of these interventions. And the next is the schools and facilities should be disaster resilient. And this has been a critical element because, as I mentioned, after the earthquake, we were having a range of floods like 2010 and later in 2012 and 22, where a million of children were affected. So we have been incorporating the seismic resistant schools designs through the government, as well as the erased structures, school structures within the flood affected areas, so that the schools are resilient and they can face the natural disasters. Next, please. So the components of Pakistan school safety framework has been the infrastructural safety, as I mentioned, in terms of designs and in terms of resilience of the structure, premises of the safety of the premises, physical safety of the structures, fire safety, environmental safety, and psychological safety. So after the COVID, we have been discussing the updating of school safety framework to accommodate the pandemics, and this has been considered by all stakeholders, and the revision has been in process. And recently we have received the grant from Education Cannot Wait around anticipatory action that is basically one of the pilot globally in 2 countries, and Pakistan is one of them. So here we will be integrating the anticipatory action approach in consultation with the stakeholders in almost like over 300 schools in 2 provinces which are prone to these climate issues, specifically the riverine floods. Next, please. So thank you. This is the overall structure of Pakistan school safety framework, which has been appreciated by the communities, particularly the engagement of the children and community has been very critical in terms of scale up and in terms of implementation of the interventions. Those has been included into the school safety framework and school safety plan. Now, like school improvement plan is having a component of school safety as well across the country, and we have been able to mainstream all these evacuation drills, mock drills, and first aid into the schools which are prone to different hazards. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Yatsir. So we go to the last study case from Malawi by Alan Majensi. Please, the floor is yours, and go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. So Malawi, I don't have a slide per se, but Malawi, just like the rest of the countries, we're experiencing education on the crossroads as well, because of usually the floods, almost on an annual basis. And when these floods hit, it's usually learners, children that are affected because people run into schools. So Save the Children, together with funding from the GCPEA, we are working with UNESCO on a project called Climate Smart Education System Strategic Capability Initiative, which aims to enhance the capacities to mainstream climate change, adaptation, and environmental sustainability into education sector plans, budgets, and strategies. So our main partners or our focus stakeholders are the Ministry of Education as the primary one, and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Climate Change, which is the policy holder on disaster risk reduction. So under this project, we are looking at 5 focus areas. Number 1, looking at evidence-based policies and plans. Number 2, resilience of schools to climate risks. So we have issues to do with construction and all that. Then we have climate data integration into the education management information system, or the MS for Malawi. And then number 4, we have cross-sector coordination and access to climate financing. So we also have a gap when it comes to climate financing. As a country, almost on an annual basis, they develop what they call the multi-sectoral hazard contingency plan, which has budgets, forecasts. But then at the end of the day, when it comes to financing such sectors, it's always a problem. So we will be also supporting this sector. And finally, we are looking at curricula, pedagogy, and teacher training when it comes to school safety and disaster risk reduction. You agree with me that the education sector is the channel for all when it comes to dissemination of information, whether be it in disaster risk reduction or issues of sexual reproductive and health rights. So at the end of the day, the education sector is the primary one. So that's why we are also trying to work on issues of curricula. So this project for us, it has come at an important juncture where the country is working on what we call the National Adaptation Plan, or the NAP. And 2 weeks ago, what was of interest to us is we had a meeting with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Climate Change, which is spearheading the development of the NAP, just to find out how far they have gone in terms of inclusion of issues of education. And to our learning and to our shock, we discovered that the education sector was not coming out clear, like in terms of priorities. The education sector was not coming out clear. So I think this came at the right stage for us, as we had to make sure that we lobby for the inclusion of the education sector in the National Adaptation Plan. And they actually appreciated the efforts that we had shown to ensure that the education sector is coming out, because at the end of the day, all this can be done, but the Ministry of Education will be important when it comes to issues of curricula, issues of teacher training. So we're at that stage, and the Ministry of Natural Resources have accepted to bring on board the issues of education. So this is the direction that we are heading as Save the Children, and the Ministry of Education showing the willingness and the commitment to make sure that this has been brought into fruition. It's a one-year initiative which has commenced in July. And when we come to June with the National Adaptation Plan process, I think we would have made some strides, which would be key for learning for other countries as well. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me clearly? Just wanted to check my audio again.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so yeah, we're excited to share some of our learnings and also practices in the Philippines, especially in implementing the comprehensive school safety framework in the lens of using the ecosystem approach. So in 2018, we launched a powerful partnership between the Department of Education, Prudence Foundation, and Save the Children to build the resilience of the education system in the Philippines from all hazards, including the impact of the climate crisis, through the education safe from disasters, developing an ecosystem for comprehensive school safety in the Philippines. So we're happy to share a bit of the overview in the Philippine context and also about some learnings and gains of the project. Next slide, please. As you can see in the slide, the Philippines ranks first in terms of the World Risk Index in the past 2 years. So that means we are the country that is most exposed to different hazards and risk, and also disasters. Actually, we're currently in the middle of a typhoon and flooding at the moment. And annually, we have this around 20 to more than 20 typhoons. And most, or around 5 to 6 of it, are destructive. Just to give you an overview of the education system, there's a total of around 47,000 schools in the country. And as you can see in the figures below, more than 90% of it are exposed or already experience natural hazards, and more than 21,000 experience human-induced hazards. So based from the data from the Department of Education, these are the risks and hazards where schools are exposed in the past 3 years, and also including there is the number of schools used as evacuation centers during disasters. Next slide, please. Considering the context in the country, the government and also Save the Children and other private sectors are also collaborating in terms of ensuring that it is supporting the current demands and needs, considering the different hazards and risks that we experience. So just wanted to share this enabling environment, which can actually be a good advocacy also to other countries and other setup. Like for the first one, the Department of Education has its own disaster risk reduction and management service. So this is a bureau within the Ministry of Education that really focuses in terms of coordinating DRR interventions or school safety interventions at the country. They also have their own staff at the national level, subnational level, and a coordinator or assigned teacher that serves as the DRR or school safety focal at the school level. Policies were also approved and also being implemented, aligning comprehensive school safety framework to the national policy of the government. So sorry, the one that I've shared here is still the previous one, but this is still aligned in terms of the different thematic areas and the different pillars of the comprehensive school safety framework. As partners in the education cluster, Save the Children is also providing technical support together with UNICEF with the Department of Education in form of response interventions to education cluster. But there's also a separate or a different mandate or role for preparedness, mitigation, and also prevention mechanisms through Education Resilience Working Group. Next slide, please. So the Comprehensive School Safety Ecosystem Project is actually based on the main principles of the Comprehensive School Safety Framework. However, it leverages innovation, technology, data, collaboration, and also children's participation. So children in the Philippines can be kept safe at school and get the best start in life through building greater resilience to disasters and other emergencies. So as you can see there in the diagram, so key component at the center is the Comprehensive School Safety Framework. Also the importance of information system, data, while also tapping child inclusion, community participation, and social accountability, so that it will inform school governance and also school improvement planning. So we wanted this approach to be school-centered instead of a very centralized approach, so that the needs of each school and participation of different stakeholders in terms of school safety framework programming will be strengthened. Yeah, next slide, please. So the project is designed and implemented 3 applications that would be easily accessible and user-friendly to support the data collection, analysis, and reporting on disaster risk reduction for schools through division, region, and at the national level. So these are the tools that we have developed together with the Department of Education, and we also digitize it, considering the need for a swift data in both preparedness, response, and also engaging children through child participation. So I'll start with the first one. The rapid assessment of damages report is actually a school-level reporting mechanism that is used after an emergency or any hazard to report the impact of disasters on facilities, learning materials, and number of casualties among learners and non-learners. So the aim is to provide rapid information on the situation and needs of schools in real time following hazard impacts. So the official launch of the app was organized in October 2020. So during pandemic, it was initially pilot tested, covering all schools in the country. So as of this point, around 44,000 schools, or 95% of the schools in the country, have already registered in the DRRM information system with a total of more than 56,000 users. And rapid assessment of damages report was already used by more than 30,000 schools in various hazards or disasters events in the past 4 years. The second one is the student-led school watching checklist, which actually raises both the awareness and engagement of children and promotes child-centered social accountability on school safety. So just a brief overview how to use it. Children are assigned a specific space in the school by the DRR coordinator and asked to identify minor and major hazards that they can see while taking pictures. So this app was pilot tested on a small scale and virtually during the pandemic, and it was officially now launched as part of the package of the information system in 2022. So since school resumption started last school year, so currently it is being implemented in other regions or some schools in the country. So it's not yet that national compared to radar. And then the third one is the child-centered, the CSS monitoring checklist. So this is the comprehensive school safety monitoring checklist for schools to assess compliance to the CSS indicator based on the framework, and also to monitor the presence and implementation of the school safety initiatives. So one advantage of this application is that it was already embedded to the basic education information system, so that all preparedness and school safety data sets from the schools are automatically linked in this application through user interface or application programming interface. So these reports, these applications are accessible at the school, subnational levels, regional, and at the national level, so that school reports are automatically be-prepared to inform decisions in preparedness, response, and ensuring feedback from children through child participation using the SWAP. Next slide, please. So just sharing some of the learnings and achievements that was captured by KAID, one of our external evaluator, based on the experience of the 4-year implementation of the project. So like what was highlighted earlier, the system is currently used by 95% of the schools. So these 5% are those might have challenges in terms of connectivity, and also GDA areas where we are also currently advocating to the Department of Education to ensure that they are supported and be able to participate in providing data and information. The SWAP Act also increases children's participation or increases accountability on school management to fix minor damages and improve school safety. So the limitation now is actually the swift response of the school in addressing major damages. So what was highlighted is still the minor damages because of some budgeting and operational considerations in the bureaucracy of the Department of Education. Faster, higher quality data was also observed. Currently, they already have an historical data of school damages and better understand needs for planning. Like what I've shared, more than 30,000 schools were already able to use the rapid assessment of damages reports in various hazard events. The system is actually integrated now in the basic education information system. Some evidences and learnings in terms of how it also strengthens school and local government partnership through the data sets and reports that can be shared to local government units and also to the other partners at the local level. And the data from radar was also used to understand the response gap and contributed to the increase in terms of the Department of Education's response budget. So despite these learnings, are there still a lot of opportunities and challenges, like how to ensure that the climate risks are integrated, considering the experience of heat wave, and also the integration of WASH in schools, child protection into one system. So that is something that we're exploring now in terms of looking for partners and possible funding support that can really strengthen and pilot the all hazards approach in our school safety through information system enhancement or system strengthening. So that ends my presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Marlon. Now we will go to experience from Lebanon that will be facilitated by Rania Hamoud and Yara Hamadeh from Save the Children.
Hello, this is Rania Hamoud. I'm the education specialist at Save the Children Lebanon. I will be talking about the SIP, which we are implementing in public schools in Lebanon and inside our centers where we have education programs. Next slide, please. So what is the School Improvement Plan, or SIP? The SIP is a strategic tool that we use to identify and address key areas of improvement inside the schools. We focus on creating a safe, inclusive, and a supportive environment that enhances the educational experience. SIP is an integral part of Save the Children Lebanon efforts to improve school infrastructure and education outcomes in coordination with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Next slide, please. So what are the key elements of SIP and who we include in this process? First, child participation, involvement of students in the decision-making process to ensure their needs and their perspectives are considered. We also include parental involvement, active engagement of parents in the development and implementation of school improvement plans. School community and school engagement is very important. We have a close collaboration with teachers, school management committees, and local communities to foster a shared responsibility for the school improvement plan that they are going to create. Next slide, please. So what we do under SIP, we promote child participation. Children are central of the SIP process. Their voices are heard and valued in identifying areas of improvement. So normally we do meetings with all the children, and then we do some trainings, and following the trainings, we teach children how to contribute into the process. The activities include students counseling, feedback session, and participatory workshops. The approach empowers children, giving them a sense of ownership and responsibility toward their school or their environment. We also work with parents. We enhance parental involvement. Parents are engaged through regular meetings and surveys and workshops to ensure their input is reflected in the SIP. This involvement helps build trust and collaboration between schools and families, creating more supportive educational environment. Parents play a critical role in monitoring and supporting the implementation of the SIP action. We also work with strengthening school community engagement, collaboration with teachers, school management committees, and community members to ensure a holistic approach to the school improvement plan. This engagement fosters a sense of community ownership and makes the SIP a shared responsibility. We have an ongoing communication and feedback groups are established to ensure transparency and collective action. So mainly we work with children, parents, and school communities, and in order to create a plan that they all agree on in order to create a safe environment, for these children. We referred also to the Ministry of Education. We shared the plan with the Ministry of Education and with other actors working in the area in order to avoid any duplication in case some of the plans might be WASH or other activities, so that the WASH sector is also informed about the plan and what we are doing. Second slide, please. So the Safe School Declaration in Lebanon, Save the Children in Lebanon has the potential to explore a Safe School Declaration as an advocacy and policy influencing entry point with the government of Lebanon and other actors in the country, and also as an entry point for monitoring and reporting of incidents. Right now, we are working closely with MEHE, the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. From the beginning of all our projects, we inform them before the beginning in which schools we will be implementing, and we also share with them our SIP plans, and we work in close coordination with other actors working in the area. Moving forward, we'll be also working on our advocacy plan. Lebanon is almost the corresponding of the UNCR on protecting education during conflict. Lebanon can operationalize the resolution by implementing the guidance, namely by changing their military doctrine or manuals to include protections for education factors. Lebanon also stands as the call of action on education in crisis situation. The transforming education that is taking place in Lebanon since September 2022. This will be an entry point to the discussion with the Ministry of Education and an opportunity to push for SSD implementation. Something to highlight also since September and what is going on in Lebanon. We are Save the Children, we are working in education and emergency, and we are providing the sector with education and emergency trainings and how we can support children in this situation. This year, the ambition of the Safe School Advocacy will be to explore what can be done beyond the signing of various commitments and what the interest capacity of current government will be to engage, knowing that the multiple and complex issues we are seeing in the education spaces. This related also to what we are, the escalation that are taking place in the south right now, and the big number of children that are out of school. This is all from my end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Save the Children Lebanon for sharing their case. Now is the time for having some remarks from Neven Kenesevich, Chief of Education from UNICEF Nepal.
Oh, thank you so much. And I mean, congratulations to both of the teams. I mean, some really amazing work that's going on the ground. I just wanted to reflect for a moment, very briefly, if I could. Prior to my current role, I mean, I was working with our UNICEF Education Emergency Team at our headquarters in New York. And part of my portfolio there was the work with GADRRRES. So I was the global chair for GADRRRES in the rotation role with UNESCO. So I was doing that for a couple of years. And during that period, we had actually updated the comprehensive school safety framework. And one of the or three of the key areas that were touched upon or were drivers for that update were a recognition for a much stronger focus on learning continuity based on the lessons from COVID that I think everyone appreciated, but few people were applying those in the lower developed countries where many of us often work. The other was really trying to strengthen the linkage with climate change. And then the other was really having a stronger focus around the enabling environments work. So the enabling the foundations. And I see from the presentation in the Philippines, if there were two things I could touch on in both of these presentations that came out that I think are very strong and speak to a couple of these areas. One is around the IEMIS work, so the Integrated Education Monitoring Information System. Very impressive, not just the coverage, but the fact that here's an example of a country, and we've actually done something very similar with the government in Nepal, but getting better data for preparedness, for planning and response. And I think that is just so critical to helping us as a community work more effectively in this space. But the other one also is this point that our colleagues from Lebanon touched on around the school improvement plans. So one of the things similarly we're doing here in Nepal with the government is really trying to ensure that any of these preparedness and mitigation and kind of all hazards approach is really strongly integrated into these SIEPs so that we get action not just from a system level, but where it's needed, on the ground, in schools, and supporting children, manage different types of crises and emergencies that create so many risks for them. But if I could touch on one other point just briefly, and using the example of Nepal also, Nepal, like many other countries in the world, is one that's faced by multiple hazards. We have regular floods here. There are droughts during the dry season. We are increasingly getting these very extreme heat and cold waves because of climate change. People often look at Nepal and think about earthquakes, but these other climate-induced emergencies are very prevalent, but they're also becoming much, much worse. So Nepal right now is a country that is contributing to climate change. It's about accounts for 0.1% of carbon emission globally, yet it is the fourth most climate vulnerable country to the impacts of climate change. And so we're seeing this happen much, much more. And in that regard, one of the things that we've tried to do over the past year and a little bit, and I think is an interesting area of work for many other countries, is looking at how we can also integrate climate action into the comprehensive school safety implementation at school level, either through SIEPs or through mapping of climate relevant hazards at school level, but also through engaging young people, children, through eco clubs and communities into locally relevant climate actions, whether that's looking at promoting biodiversity or having renewable energy usage in schools, or planting of trees to increase absorption capacities and really strengthen the structural integrity of schools and their surroundings and so on. I think this is an area that we talked a lot about when we were trying to update the global framework. And I think it's one area that many of us who are working on the update were very excited about, but we haven't yet as a community really leveraged that very strongly. And I think one of the areas moving forward that many of us can look at doing more of, and we're trying to find those solutions here, but how to integrate the climate action work into our DRR work more effectively. So we're not just taking a very a stronger mitigation perspective, but also looking at some of those adaptation actions through our work in implementing CSSF in schools. I mean, just on a final note, and I won't beleaguer this too much because I do think that we have a tremendous opportunity moving forward, given the coverage that the comprehensive school safety strategies have in many of the countries we're working in. It can vary from 25% of the schools in a country to 50%. And in some instances through the EMIS type of work, 100% of schools, like the Philippines, like in Nepal as well. But in terms of actual work around CSSF mitigation adaptation, we're probably only covering with the partners here about 25% of all of the schools in the country, which is a good number, but there's still much more room to grow in that space, even though the CSS is a kind of national policy right now that's been taken up by the government and is part of the school education sector plan for national scale-up and implementation. But the main point, I think, that would be good to capitalize on as a community, if we're talking about climate change work, is through the CSSF and its implementation in schools. We have a ready-made entry point to have massive coverage at scale across the world, or many parts of the world, that few other mechanisms offer. And I think this is a really game-changing possibility in terms of providing solutions to climate change actors. How can we actually leverage education sectors from both a mitigation and adaptation climate change action perspectives? And we're very good as a community, I think, in terms of the DRR approach. I think we still have a lot of space to grow in terms of our adaptation and climate change action through schools and mechanisms like the CSSF. But I mean, really exciting presentations. I mean, congratulations to both of the country teams. I wish I had sent in our presentation a little bit earlier from Nepal, so I could share with you a few more details from here. But I think many of the things that colleagues from the two countries, and I'm sure the other countries will share in the upcoming presentations, touch on these similar issues. And I think, again, the key one from the systems perspective is the data work. The one that I kind of took away from the Philippine presentation and also Lebanon, but wasn't specified very clearly, but something that we focused a lot on over the past years in Nepal, is the capacity development of government at local levels to really take the lead on a lot of this work through being a lead in the cluster coordination mechanism. And just to highlight one really positive success on that, and I won't have time to go into it, but through a lot of that work that we've done here in Nepal with the partners, following the earthquake we had in the western part of the country last year that impacted about 150,000 children, destroyed, it was about 1,500 classrooms and so on. There was not a single day lost in terms of learning for children. Now, part of that had to do because of the real strong capacity development work in government leadership for the emergency response and getting education structures and systems back up and running for kids. And that was supported by a lot of the partners as well initially. But the continuation of that has certainly been carried by the government. Now, the other reason that, of course, they didn't lose any days in learning is that the earthquake hit when we had a school break for 2 weeks. So it gave us a bit of time. I don't know if it would have been the same case if it happened when school was in, but nevertheless, we have a great story from Nepal in terms of strengthening some of the key areas that needed strengthening and how that can be strengthened in terms of the CSSF. And that was really strengthening learning continuity measures in the immediate aftermath of an emergency for children, ensuring they're safe in learning and so on and so forth. But anyway, look, thanks so much, colleagues. I'll stop there because I fear I'm talking too much as usual, probably. But I'll hand it back to colleagues at INI. And again, congratulations to all of the teams, and really great to see the wonderful work happening. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution. It's really insightful to hear also the country examples. So GADRRRES calls on all governments, development partners, and organizations to endorse, implement, report on, and champion the comprehensive school safety framework. What does it mean to endorse? Endorsing the CSSF demonstrates a commitment to protect children and teachers from harm in schools. It also ensures all children have continuous access to learning and receive an education, and also demonstrates a commitment to support children with knowledge and skills that can keep them safe. It also means committing to work towards implementing and institutionalizing the 3 pillars and foundation of the CSSF that my colleague Maya walked through in the beginning. What does it mean to implement? Implementation can be achieved through policy change, through programming, so utilizing GADRRRES resources and lessons learned from other countries, allocating the necessary local and national resources to support the implementation of the CSSF, and also establishing multi-sector coordination mechanisms. Reporting. So reporting on the CSSF means being accountable to the commitment made through the endorsement. It can also take the form of engaging with the 2024 Comprehensive School Safety Policy Survey and the subsequent reporting processes. Championing the CSSF, it means to act as a leading example of comprehensive school safety, sharing lessons learned, best practices, experiences, and case studies with other countries and publicly, even like in events, social media, etc. And also encourage other countries to endorse and implement the CSSF, including through providing technical assistance, financial support to neighboring or high-risk, low-capacity countries with existing cooperation links. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we see some key advocacy moments that have been scheduled for the remainder of the year. We have 2 international days, which both emphasize the need to embed disaster risk reduction in education settings, but also promote safe and protective school environments. In blue, you may see the regional platforms and the global platform that has been planned for 2025. So in the post-2015 Sendai framework era, regional platforms remain a key opportunity to tackle transboundary issues around disaster risk, disaster prevention and preparedness, provide leadership and direction, and propose relevant solutions to address disaster risk and to build the resilience of communities and nations. You see that there have been scheduled 4 regional platforms, one for East Asia and Pacific, one for Africa, one for the Arab states, and the Europe and Central Asia regional platform for DRR. Regarding the global platform for 2025, the overall theme is Everyday Counts, Act for Resilience Today, which the particular motto embodies an urgency to course action to course correct the trajectory of progress in the implementation of the Sendai framework goals, as also articulated in the midterm review. We also have the G20 Education Ministers meeting that will be also followed from the Global Education meeting, and the first ever Global Ministerial Conference on Ending Violence Against Children. The next slide, please. Here you may see, and you will also receive by email, the available resources that can help you with any advocacy efforts, either around these events or any other national or subnational efforts to endorse, implement, and monitor and report on the CSSF. So there is the Comprehensive School Safety Framework 2022-2030. We also have developed and will be finalized within the upcoming weeks the CSSF Advocacy Toolkit that will be disseminated through the GADRRRES members. The CSS policy survey, as stated before, has been already launched, and we expect the first results to come in later in October and November. We also have the super useful UNDRR activation toolkit for the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. This is available from UNDRR. And there is also the blog on how safe are schools, which has been posted in the GCPEA website. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I'll leave you with a statement from the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. And back to you, Ariel.
Thank you very much. We are ending now the webinar with the questions and answers after the enlightening and inspiring examples from the Global Coalition to Protect Attacks from Education, from Pakistan and from Malawi, and the advocacy opportunities. We go for the questions and answers part. Anya, all yours.
Thanks, Ariel. And just to echo the thanks to all the speakers, phenomenal presentations, really fascinating and great to see the CSSF in action. Just to start with the question from Nadia from UNICEF, this is to our colleague Yasir. What are the best practices in Pakistan around CSSF, given that it was so well received by children and communities and the government?
Thank you very much, Nadia. Basically, the practices that we were having at the school level was around the engagement of the communities, because the documents, the policies and plans, unless and until not translated into the actions, they are not useful. So in this particular case, we have been able to take it forward to the communities and integrate it within the school improvement plan with the schools, as a school safety plan, where all these school safety plans has been displayed into the schools so that everybody is aware of. The communities were engaged, They have been identifying the safe exits during the hazards. Particularly, the engagement of children has been very much encouraging, as the children in middle, secondary, and even in higher secondary schools, they has been engaged in different exercises, mock drills, first aid exercises, and they have taken this messages back home and to the communities as well. So these children clubs formed, for example, into the schools, the champion clubs, the mother group support groups, all these messages has been taken and very well received, and it has been interesting for them to participate in all these activities, and as a result, the school calendar has been reflecting all these activities gradually, particularly in the provinces where we are having the natural and man-made disasters. So that was the interesting part that we have been now scaling up to the other provinces and to the other schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yazir. And I think what you shared really speaks to the theme of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction this year, that sense that we heard from Jeanette about empowering children and young people for their own resilience, as well as their community resilience, and the importance of education in that. I see we have another question. This question is from Fernando. How will September 9th be advocated in Mozambique? Requesting interest in joining there. If there's a group that will be marching or promoting the day, and is CSSF being implemented in Mozambique? I don't know if we have any colleagues from Mozambique on the call. So Fernando, perhaps we can get back to you on the engagement with CSSF in Mozambique, unless there are any colleagues who are wishing to come in on that right now. Perhaps Ilaria. Sure, I saw you go off mute.
Yes, sorry, my computer is a bit slow. I think I guess suppose the question is related to the International Day to protect education from attack. We haven't heard any specific initiative from our coalition members and partners related to Mozambique, but we can follow up after the webinar, trying to inquiry through the coalition members if there's anything in particular that you can engage in. Otherwise, there is something happening at the AU level that I also can share with you, that is being organized by Save the Children, in which GCPEA will participate, and also international level. But we can try to investigate if there's any particular activity in Mozambique.
Thanks, Ilaria. And I see Caroline has also put in the chat that we do have a team working on implementing the CSS policy survey, which I added a link to in the chat earlier, and we can connect you with those colleagues. So activity happening around the AU and Mozambique, we put in contact with colleagues on the ground there, as well as around the CSSF. And I know we're almost at time, but just to say it's fantastic to have that engagement already from you, Frederick, and to hear this excitement. And we really believe that this is an opportunity to completely come out and say comprehensive school safety is important, it matters to us, and together we're advocating to ensure every child can realize their right to learn in a safe environment.
Elise Leonard is asking the Lebanon team about the linkages between the SIP and the Safe School Declaration.
Yes. Anyone from the Lebanon office, Rania or Yara? Can you get that question, please?
No. Neven, you have your hand up, please.
Yes.
Yeah, no, thanks, colleagues. Fortunately, I do know a little bit about this particular issue. So when we were doing the updates to the comprehensive school framework, one of the goals was to try and create an integrated platform that multiple different global frameworks could be integrated around. And school safety, it was agreed, it really will depend, the specific needs around actions for school safety would depend on, essentially your risk analysis at school. And so if issues of conflict or insecurity or, other forms of school safety for children that were relevant to the Safe Schools Declaration and the Safe Schools Framework fit into that, well, that was essentially the linkage, right? So it's not that the Comprehensive School Safety Framework is superseding the Safe Schools Declaration and its implementation measures, but that it was a mechanism through which to help align and help strengthen actions to promote school safety based on what your risk assessment tells you is needed at the school. In some contexts, school safety, attacks on schools, teachers, children, and so on, abduction of children might not be a hazard that you need to plan and respond to. In other cases, it is. So it really would also then come down to your risk assessment. Hopefully that helps. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, Neven. We have another questions for Marlon from Alan Malansi. It's 4 questions, so I will try to summarize. Marlon Alan is looking forward to know about the government's financial supports towards DRR, about the capacity of the teacher to prepare and respond during an emergency, and a very important one, the experience working with children from marginalized communities, including those with disabilities.
Yes, so I think I'll start with the first one regarding financing of DRR in school safety. So again, I'll share a brief context in the Philippines. There's a policy that was approved in 2010 for a disaster preparedness budget, which actually requires all government offices, including DepEd, to have at least 5% of the overall budget for disaster preparedness response intervention. So I think, but that's just the minimum. So aside from the staffing and focals at the school level and all, they have that fund annually provided to ensure that they can implement their own preparedness interventions, response interventions, and currently now, climate adaptation and mitigation programs also. So I think that's something that is being maximized, and with the data that the system is providing, it helps decision makers in terms of what to prioritize with the specific budget that they have, and also for advocacy purposes in terms of how to increase budgets or how to adjust budgets at the national and subnational levels based on the need and data in the information system. So that's one. And second, in terms of the capacity of teachers, since there's a focal within the schools to serve as the school safety focal person or DRR coordinator, what Save the Children and other partners are doing here is to strengthen the school safety teams. So we wanted to ensure that aside from that focal assigned by the national government and DepEd, she will have her own team composed of different teachers, and also linking it to the village leads, focals, and children representatives. So that school safety team has representation both from children and local government level, which actually strengthens the capacity of the school also in terms of leveraging funding, coordination, and also tapping different resources outside the school. Our key message always is that the school is within the community. So school plans should also be integrated in the village plans and wider government plans. So, and also even the early warning systems should be aligned also. So I think that's the capacity, which is beyond the training, but more on the capacity for disaster risks component and climate. And The third one, sorry, I missed the third point.
The third one was about the experience working with marginalized communities, including children with disabilities.
Yes, so actually that's something that we have also supported and pilot tested together with DepEd. So the one I've shared in the chat box, there's a video there about children's participation, which is being institutionalized also aside from the tools. So we have co-designed and developed modules together with children and also adapted it to children with disabilities. And part of the capacity also and co-design process is ensuring that these children with disabilities will also play a more proactive role with other children so they can also support and participate more meaningfully instead of like just being prioritized during disaster. So we have those key messages modules that is being contextualized depending on each context and also based on the needs of children in the schools. So maybe that's just a brief description, but I shared the link to the video where you can also see some examples to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are reaching the hour of the webinar, so we are ending the session. From my end, I would like to thank and congratulate all the participants, all the panelists, with specific emphasis to the countries, Philippines, Lebanon, and others that presented the cases. Neven, I see your hand up.
No, thank you. I mean, I know you want to close, so I won't keep anyone too long, but I did see in the question boxes that there were quite a lot of questions in the chat box, quite a lot of questions around integrating conflict into the updated CSSF. I think I touched on that a little bit, but you know, when reflecting on that question, while our colleagues from the Philippines were speaking, you know, I did recall one of the key considerations we also did have was, I mean, I just wanted to underscore this. There will certainly be situations where it might not be possible to keep schools open, given the level of risk or threat or danger and whatnot. But it's in those circumstances as well that there was also a much stronger emphasis on issues of learning continuity measures. So, you know, transferring the lessons of COVID-19, how did we continue learning for children when schools were closed to these other contexts where maybe children might not be able to stay in schools and schools to be open and because of safety issues, applying these you know, dynamic learning continuity measures in such settings is also one solution. The staple solutions like schools as zones of peace was also one that remains a steadfast, you know, component of the comprehensive school safety framework and so on. But I think it's a very good question. And just to underscore as well, and then I also wanted to thank the organizers from MINI and other partners and all of you that spoke. But you know, when the framework, the CSSF was updated, there was also a strong recognition that the updates to it will be iterative. And there are a lot of implementation guidelines and supplements that were being still collated and put together that would support colleagues on the ground. So keep your eyes open for that. And I'm sure our beloved colleagues from GADRRRES will be announcing when these supplemental resources are available to support all of us on the ground. Thanks so much. Over.
Much for the inspiring examples of the countries who are taking forward the implementation, report and champion of the CSSF and the Global Coalition to Protect Attacks from Education. So I think my closing remarks is that we are not in the political endorsement, so we can implement, report and champion and take opportunity of the upcoming advocacy events and sessions to take forward the CSSFs and the climate change. Nothing further from MINI and GADRRRES. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar, and have a nice rest of the day.